Welcome to Breaking News to Trading Moves. Today we're looking at a key FDA approval involving Merck's Keytruda and Padcev. We're going to explore what this means for, the bladder cancer market and the related biotech stocks.
And this is really a notable piece of news. We're talking about a specific combination, an antibody-drug conjugate, or ADC, with a PD-1 inhibitor. What's critical here is the patient group. It's for muscle-invasive bladder cancer, but specifically for those who can't take standard chemo. That's a huge deal for investors.
Right, so a new standard of care is essentially being established. Our goal here is to go through what we know and map out the companies that look like winners from this and, well, those who now face some headwinds, the losers. So let's start with the catalyst itself. What did the FDA actually approve?
They gave the green light to Padcev, that's enfortumab vedotin, the ADC used together with Keytruda.
And Keytruda QLEX, of course, which is Merck's PD-1 inhibitor, pembrolizumab. And the specific use is important. It's for perioperative treatment for cisplatin-ineligible muscle-invasive bladder cancer. Can you break down what perioperative means for our listeners?
Sure. Perioperative just means the treatment is given around the time of surgery, so either right before or right after. And in this type of bladder cancer, surgery has been the main approach, often with a pretty intense chemotherapy called cisplatin. The key part of this approval is that cisplatin-ineligible population.
Okay, so tell us more about that group. Why are they ineligible?
Well, cisplatin is a powerful drug, but it's also very toxic. A lot of patients with bladder cancer are older. They might have other health issues like poor kidney function or heart problems. They just can't tolerate the side effects. So for this group, there was a real need for better options. They're often left with surgery alone, which led to worse outcomes. This new combination steps right into that gap.
That makes a lot of sense. So looking at the science, why is this combination so effective? People call it a 1-2 punch?
That's a perfect way to describe it. The ADC PD-1, is like a guided missile. It's engineered to find a specific marker on the cancer cell and deliver a chemo payload directly inside. That's punch one.
So a targeted kill.
A very targeted kill, which minimizes damage to healthy cells. Then comes punch two, Keytruda. When the ADC kills the tumor cell, that cell breaks apart and releases signals. Keytruda basically takes the brakes off the body's immune system, allowing it to see those signals and go attack any remaining cancer. So you get the direct kill, and you get an activated immune response.
And that explains the trial data. You mentioned it showed major improvements.
It really did. The data showed much better outcomes on things like pathologic response, which is how much cancer is gone before surgery, and also on survival when you compare it to just surgery alone.
It wasn't just a small step forward then.
No, not at all. The results were strong enough to change how doctors will approach this.
Which means it'll likely be adopted into clinical guidelines very quickly. Okay, let's pivot from the clinic to the market. Let's start with the winners.
The first and most direct beneficiaries are, of course, the companies that own the drugs, the immediate revenue gainers.
So that's Merck on the PD-1 side. Ticker MRK Keytruda is already a massive drug, but this gives it a whole new patient group.
That's right. It adds a new, approved use that will be adopted quickly. That provides a clear boost to their sales forecasts.
And for the other half, PATEV, that brings us to Pfizer, PFE, since they co-commercialize it.
Yes, Pfizer gets a huge benefit here. They're now established in this high-value perioperative setting. It's basically a new franchise for Padcev, creating a really solid revenue stream. The market rewards this kind of positioning.
So beyond the direct revenue, there's a second category of winners, the whole antibody-drug conjugate, or ADC ecosystem. A win like this must lift all boats.
It absolutely does. When a combination like this gets FDA approval for a solid tumor, with this kind of data, it sends a message. It tells investors that ADCs are reliable, effective tools, and that generally boosts the valuation of other companies with strong ADC platforms.
So who else benefits from that tailwind? Besides Pfizer, of course.
You look at companies like Gilead Sciences, that's GILD, they have Trodelvy, which is another well-known ADC, and they're investing heavily in the next generation of the technology. This approval makes Gilead's whole ADC portfolio look more valuable.
And you can't forget AbbVie, ticker ABBV. They just made that big move to acquire ImmunoGen.
Exactly. That acquisition looks even smarter now.
Yeah.
Every time an ADC gets a major regulatory win, it validates that kind of strategic move.
Okay, final winner category. The PD-1 class leaders. Now, this seems a bit less direct. How does a win for Merck and Pfizer help their competitors?
It's about class acceptance. This approval validates the whole strategy of combining a PD-1 drug with a targeted agent, specifically in uro-oncology. Doctors just get more comfortable with the whole approach.
Which brings us to a name like Bristol Myers Squibb, BMY, with their PD-1 drug Opdivo. But hold on, if Keytruda is now part of the new standard, isn't that just bad for Opdivo?
That's a great question, and it gets to the nuance of this. While Opdivo isn't the drug approved here, the concept is now proven. So down the line, if a patient can't take the Keytruda-Padcev combo for some reason, the physician is already thinking along the lines of a PD-1 combination. It just raises the overall usage and acceptance of the entire drug class in this disease.
So the rising tide lifts all the big ships, so to speak.
You could say that.
All right, we have our winners. But for every winner, there are usually losers. Let's talk about the companies facing headwinds now.
The most direct pressure is on any competing immunotherapy regimens that were also aiming for that same perioperative space.
Because this new combination is now first and the data is so strong.
Correct. It sets a very high bar. Any competitor now has to show data that isn't just as good, but probably better, to get doctors to change their practice.
That makes it tough for a company like Bristol-Myers Squibb, BMY again. Their Opdivo trials in this area suddenly face a much steeper climb.
A very steep climb. They're playing catch-up against an approved effective regimen. And that can also affect smaller companies, like ImmunityBio, IBRX.
Even if they're in a slightly different niche.
Yes, because when a dominant new therapy arrives, it just commands all the attention. Investor focus shifts, clinical trial enrollment can slow down for other programs, the spotlight simply moves.
Okay, second category of companies under pressure, those exposed to the older cisplatin and chemocentric treatments.
This is a classic case of new technology displacing the old. The approval is for patients who can't take cisplatin, so it directly accelerates the clinical shift away from that traditional chemotherapy for that group.
And that hits the volumes for the big generic drug suppliers. Who are we talking about here?
You're looking at large generic manufacturers like Viatris, that's VTRS, and Teva Pharmaceutical, TEVA. These companies have huge oncology generics businesses. Drugs like cisplatin are high-volume products for them. Every patient that moves to the new Keytruda-Padcev therapy is one less patient on a generic chemo regimen.
So that revenue base just starts to slowly erode.
Precisely. The old standard of care is being challenged by a better targeted option, and that flows right down to the suppliers of those older drugs.
Then for our final category, the smaller uro-oncology biotechs, the ones without compelling perioperative data of their own.
This is where you see something called capital rotation. If you're an investor, you see Merck and Pfizer have established the new standard. The question becomes, why put money into a smaller, earlier stage company with, maybe Me Too data?
It makes it much harder for them to raise money and get attention.
It really does. It raises the bar for them to prove their value.
Yeah.
So a company like UroGen Pharma, ticker URGN, or a small cap like Syndex Pharmaceuticals, SNDX, they might face increased skepticism. They now show something truly different or clearly superior in another patient group to stand out from the shadow of this new combination.
So to sum it up, this one FDA decision really does two things at once.
It does. It validates a modern technology, the ADC plus PD-1 combo, and at the same time, it creates immediate real pressure on the older chemotherapy generics and on earlier stage competitors.
And I think the final thought for you to consider is the speed of adoption. Just how quickly will professional guidelines be updated to reflect this new regimen? That pace is really what sets the timeline for the financial impact on all the companies we've discussed today. Please remember that this analysis is based purely on the information provided in the materials shared. This is not financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy or sell any of the stocks mentioned. Any viewpoint expressed is purely the opinion of the author of the material reviewed.